Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it is free. Call 1-855-450-NOAH. 1-855-450-6624. Send an email. Live at AskNoahShow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. Joining me, as always, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome in, sir.
Good evening, Noah. How's it going tonight?
I'm doing well, sir. We have a special guest that is joining us. It is Stephen Paul Weber, better known as Singpolyma, the guy who brought you JMP.chat. Welcome in, sir.
Hello.
Hello, and thank you for making the time. So it was kind of a little bit impromptu, but we wanted to get you on to talk a little bit about the JMP web app. Can you tell me about app.cheogram.com?
Sure. Yeah. So we've been working on this, well, I don't even know, like 2 years now, sort of in the background. We realize that there's a bunch of platforms that just haven't had the kind of support that we've been able to achieve with Cheogram Android for a while, and we realized that with our size of team, we couldn't, we weren't going to go from scratch on every platform, so we've been working on a sort of cross-platform core, and the web app is sort of the first really baked demo of that that's been in alpha now for a little while.
How would you describe it to somebody who isn't currently using a tool? Would you say that it's ready for prime time, or is it a tool that is very much heavily in development and kind of use at your own risk?
Yeah, I mean, so I'm still calling it an alpha for now because of a couple of reasons. It is a bit under. I'm developing on it every day, so it is changing pretty frequently. We're not, doing like cut release windows yet, and also it's missing a couple of things some people might consider core features, depending on their use case. For JMP, it's not really missing anything. For people who do other things, if you want end-to-end encryption stuff, it doesn't have that in the web app yet. But we have most of the code for that done. It just hasn't rolled out. For JMP, that doesn't really matter, of course, because SMS isn't encrypted anyway. I've been using it every day for over a year, though, so it's pretty stable, and we have a pretty small community of people who are using it every day, so it's definitely usable.
Does it support voice or just text?
Yeah, voice and video.
Wow.
Not over the phone network, obviously, video, but voice over the phone network. Yeah.
So talk to me. Since we last talked, you guys have rolled something new out that I think is kind of fascinating. It's the data-only SIM and eSIM. Talk to me about JMP's data-only plan, both eSIM and SIM options.
Sure, yeah. So we have eSIMs that are basically as close as we can get to the old pay-as-you-go model, where it's just data. Because, of course, if you want a phone number, you get that from JMP over the internet to begin with, so all you need is data. But you can mix and match it, right? Of course, you can use JMP phone number with anyone's data, and you could get just our data if you just want data and don't want a phone number. That's fine. And it's never expire data, so it's a little bit pricier per gigabyte than some of these all-you-can-eat plans you can get for major carriers, but if you're not using a lot, we have people who will buy 5 gigs from us and then use it for 2 years because they're just using it, for texting and this kind of thing. And at that point, it becomes quite affordable. So the provider that we were working with to do this, they will only issue us eSIMs. But obviously, there's a lot of people who want or need SIM cards. So we were looking around for solutions for that. And that's how we stumbled into the eSIM adapter space. Realizing that there was this, market demand for people who needed a way to use eSIMs, not just our eSIMs, in any device that takes a SIM card. Mm-hmm. And so we partnered with a group that was working on that, and we're also selling a product in that space now that you can put our eSIM on or any eSIM from any provider, really. And it's 2 benefits. One, it'll work in legacy devices that don't support eSIM, but also it then works just like a regular SIM card, so you can pop it out and put it in another phone, right? Switch it back and forth, use it in a device that doesn't support eSIM and one that does, whatever, right? You can move it around. So it's kind of, I like to call it best of both worlds, where you can download the SIMs and activate them instantly, all those benefits from eSIM, but you don't get the device lock-in that you usually think about when you're thinking about an eSIM.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I've been a customer of yours for a few years now, and I recommend, anytime somebody asks me, what do you recommend for a phone? What do you recommend for a phone number? If they're willing to go to an internet-based only thing, yours is the only recommendation. And frankly, I tried a bunch before I got to JMP.chat, and they almost all lacked group messaging. And either you or somebody from your team reached out to me and you're like, hey, we do that, and signed up for it, and I haven't looked back since. And I run, in fact, not only do I have my main number, I've since ported every phone number I have access to over to jmp.chat. One, to support you guys, but two, because it's just one place that you can park all of the stuff. Can you talk to me a little bit about SnickerNet and the free instance that you're giving people when they sign up for a number?
Yeah, sure. So way back, I mean, when we first launched JMP, part of the reason we chose to build an open protocols, besides all the, good ideological reasons, was just practicality, right? People could use apps that already existed and service providers that already existed. But as we grew, it became pretty obvious that, telling people when they're signing up for your commercial voice service that they should go sign up on some volunteer-run service run by one guy out of his basement is not really the kind of, some people really like that, but it's not exactly what a lot of people are looking for as their main gateway into this other thing that they're paying for.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't want to, we talked about building and running our own Jabber hosting provider ourselves and doing everything in-house. But it's a bit of a distraction from what we're doing. And then, anyway, so Matthew was working on Snicket, and we were talking to him, and we realized it was just a great fit to partner with him, and we send him a little portion of every JMP customer's fee, and so he gets paid, and then he runs all the instances. And instead of it being one big server where everybody joins in, like you might imagine if we had run something ourselves, where we probably would have ended up running, everybody gets their own completely separate server. So they get to use either their own domain name, or they get a free something.snicket.chat domain, and then they can invite, that not only do they use it for their JMP account, but they can invite friends and family onto it to chat with them there. And so it's just another great way that people get onboarded into the ecosystem to be able to have their own little piece that they control.
Can you talk to me of what, if any, the effect of Google's decision to require Android app developers to register centrally with Google in order to distribute their application is having either on the Cheogram app or on the JMP service?
Sure, yeah. We put a blog post out about this a little while ago, and we signed the open letter from the F-Droid people about this as well. It's a big concern, certainly. I mean, we've had problems historically with Google and the Cheogram app. We're in the clear for now, probably for the foreseeable future, because we've gotten to the point where we had to back channel in through other people to get people at Google to talk to us, and so they actually know we exist now, unlike most developers. So, but I don't know how much protection that really gives us. It just means when we call them, they'll be like, oh yeah, those guys, instead of not having any idea. So there is a lot of concern there. Obviously, I would say probably 80% of people who are JMP customers are getting the app from F-Droid, which obviously won't be something that's certified under Google's new anti-competitive measures. But on the other hand, probably at least half of those people are on an alternate ROM, right? Lineage OS or something like this. Mm-hmm. And so those people won't be affected by this, as far as we know, because the alternate ROMs will be able to either not put it in or patch it out. I think most of it's going to be through Play Protect, which they usually don't include in the alternate ROMs anyway. But there will be a narrow window of people who previously would have been able to use our non-Google Play Store distribution, who now will be stuck with the Play Store. And obviously, that's a bit of a concern if there's ever trouble with the Play Store in the future.
100%. Steve, before we wrap up, anything for Singpolyma?
No, I'm just a spectator on this one. I'm a very poor use case for all of this sort of stuff. My cell phone, as you know, sits I don't even know where it is. So most of this stuff doesn't really apply, except for the odd time where I'm like, it'd be really nice to have a text message on my desktop. But aside from that, I'm probably not the target audience.
Fair enough. Singpolyma, I really appreciate the time. Thank you very much for joining us, particularly on such an impromptu. You are one of the most accessible people on the internet. I see you very passionately responding to people. People want to learn more about JMP, about Cheogram. Where do they go?
Just jmp.chat.
All right. I appreciate the time, sir. We'll get you back on the program soon.
Thank you.
1-855-450-NOAH. It's 855-450-6624. The email live@asknoahshow.com. So, Steve, you drew my attention to this idea of comprehension debt. And I wanted to bring it up and kind of talk to you about it because it really is the hidden cost to deploying AI code. So for somebody who is new to the scene or hasn't heard this, what is comprehension debt and why is it a hidden cost to developing something with AI?
So if we back up and we say developing stuff with AI can be synonymous with this idea of vibe coding, which is where you simply prompt the computer to give you software that does something specific, right? And oftentimes, so there's a wide spectrum here. I want to be very clear. There is I'm just a person with an idea and I try and flesh out that idea by giving the AI prompts and then testing the code or having it test the code and then being like, okay, looks good. It does the thing that I need it to do. Then on the far other end of the spectrum, there's what's called spec-driven development, which is developing a spec is essentially writing a giant document. And this has been around way, way, way before AI. And the idea is this document tells you what the purpose of the software is and what kind of edge cases you're solving for and what are your constraints and like all of this sort of stuff. It's a way to textually describe all of the software that you are trying to develop for. And the reason why I draw that distinction is because spec-driven development is hard. It is hard to sit down and write that document. And if you are doing that style of development, first of all, my hat's off to you because that's really hard. But second of all, you have some level of comprehension of what's going on because you've sat down and thought through and detailed out as many of these use cases that you can think through. But with that out of the way, most of the development is largely shifted towards the side of like creating prompts to do a specific thing. There may be people that lean a little bit towards spec, but not go that full way. But at the end result is you ask for some software to do a thing and it does a thing. And so then you put it into production. I'll put production in quotes, right? Like you put it into active use. But the problem is you didn't write the code. No one you knew wrote the code. Most of the people, I would say probably 80% plus of the people don't read the code that gets written. They maybe read the summary of what the AI did, and that's the extent of it. And so comprehension debt is where software gets written, and it gets written so much faster than what we could do, and so it like iterates so much faster than we could, even if you include like a series of test cases and like make sure that it's doing functional testing and all the rest of that. It's doing that way faster than we could. But the problem is AI doesn't have currently an ability to understand business logic and understanding edge cases and all the rest of that. And generally speaking, the context window that it has is during the time it writes the code. And so 3 weeks from now at 2 a.m., when the code breaks, the AI it might or might not be able to help you poke around to determine where the problem is and where it's surfaced. So comprehension debt is this idea that I'm adopting all of this code. I'm not actually ever read the code, and it's like reading. It is literally starting from scratch, where a company will have a code base that they didn't actually write. The machine wrote it, and so none of the senior developers are really familiar with it, and so you don't really understand how it links together, and maybe there's duplication in the code somewhere, or you don't understand how the code paths get to where they're going. And so when you have context of having done PRs and having tested the code and understanding and building the code base up from scratch, you have a likelihood of tracking down at least what code path this is taking. When you didn't write the code, when the code is kind of obtuse because the AI did a certain thing, it may take you 2, 3, 4, 5 times longer to identify where the problem is in the edge case, if you can do it at all.
So this has led to a new interesting problem. There was a time when you went to write code that the senior engineer, being a senior engineer, was more competent and more proficient than a junior engineer, hence the title senior. And so he could review the code faster than the junior engineer could crank it out. So the junior engineer would spend a few days, few weeks cranking out code. Senior engineer reviews it for a few hours, few days, and then carry on. And it acted as a built-in safeguard to make sure that code never hit the wild before it was peer reviewed. And what AI has done is in some ways flip that on its head, right? Now, even if you have, let's say you have the same model, you still have a junior engineer, you still have a senior engineer, and senior engineer's job is still to review the code. Junior engineer guy cranks out. The problem is junior engineer guy fires up his favorite AI model and says, I want this, and this spits out. He may or may not have any idea what it does, and he sends it off the line. Senior engineer guy probably still knows what it does, but it still takes time to sort through. And so you have this logjam now in by where the senior engineer is backlogged with all of this stuff that they have to churn through and check before it hits the wild. So what happens? Stuff flies through the cracks because you don't have, and so that built-in fail-safe is going away, and that is problematic for a lot of companies.
Yeah, ask Amazon about that and their outages recently.
Oh, really?
You didn't hear about that?
I didn't. Tell me about it.
I forget the specifics now. It was a couple of weeks ago, but essentially they had a pretty major outage where people weren't able to access their carts, or if they were actually getting sent the wrong thing. Like it was a pretty big travesty, and they essentially tracked it back to AI code that got pushed out that didn't get reviewed as thoroughly as you would hope, given the magnitude of which the AI is producing the code. So PR came in, people did their best to review it, but again, given the comprehension debt, right? You're coming in cold to this code base, and maybe you haven't been able to track down all of this, following the code path and the logic all the way through, or there are latent bugs. And another problem that exists here is when you are putting the problem is it looks like the senior developers are the ones having the problems, right? If the junior developers cranking out these features and the senior developer is the one that looks like they're the one blocking the problem, then they're going to start relying on AI assists for code review as well. Or even if they're not, you're just simply swamped with the sheer volume of code. Because one thing's for sure, AI is not very concise, even in its coding. And so it can take a very long time to untangle some stuff.
Absolutely. Can you talk to me? There's one of the things that was suggested is evaluating your own, because to some degree, you don't know what you don't know, right? So the answer here is not just throw the baby out with the bathwater, never use AI. It's a terrible tool. It's the end of all of us. It's the devil incarnate. It's not none of that. And so how does one know if it's valid to use this or it's not valid to use this? One of the suggestions is using a rating scale 1 to 5, and rank your own understanding, and at least it will help you get an idea as to, I should send this out the door versus I should definitely not send this out the door because I don't even know what's going on here.
Yeah, I mean, so one of the ways the first question is, how do you get that understanding? And the second part of that is, how do you properly judge yourself? And I suppose there's a subtext here that I kind of alluded to before, which was a lot of times when let's talk about project management. Pardon me. When you budget for a project and it's going to take X number of hours, they don't normally add like a 20% bell on top of that in order to account for review time. Usually it's, did you test it? Does the feature work? And so on. And the review part of the project plan is minimal, if it even is accounted for. But given where we're at, you're asking people to check this code in. One of the best ways to understand it is to take section by section and rewrite it yourself in when you can do that. And I don't mean rewrite it and then commit that. I mean, you take the spec, if there's a spec, or at least the requirements that the junior developer or whoever is submitting it had. You look at what was done in the code, and then you attempt to, I don't want to say do a clean room implementation, but you do an implementation where you're attempting to follow the same path, because otherwise you don't have a really good grasp of what it's doing, right? If you run some tests, you can kind of take a guess at it. It's labor intensive to do this, but you have to somehow find that ground of, I understand this enough that at 2 a.m. when I'm called to debug this, I actually have a good grasp of this. Whether it's the documentation got written really solidly. So one of the things that I've taken to is I start with a code base that I wrote. I wrote it. I know where it is. If I'm adding features to it and I'm trying to do it in a sort of quick order, I have the AI give me a giant summary, not like a tiny one, but what did you change? Where did you change it? Why did you change it? In what places was this changed? Where is it called? Give me a code flow diagram so that I understand. And I actually sit down and I go through and I read it. When it's that important and you're merging onto a code base that you already understand, it gives you, I would say that probably gives me about a 3 in terms of my understanding, right? Because the computer is doing stuff, like it's a better programmer than I am, like hands down, even though I've been doing some of this stuff for a long time. It's just better than me. And so it'll do things that I didn't know about, or it's able to read the latest standards or all of that sort of stuff. So it is one of those things that it's very difficult to rate yourself. And it's also very human to be lazy. And I fight this myself. I want to be lazy too.
Sure.
Right. But at the end of the day, the problem that you have is if it's more than just something you're running on your own, saying the AI wrote the code isn't sufficient enough, right? You are still responsible for the code that you were submitting, even if the AI wrote it itself. At the end of the day, the boss isn't going to be like, well, then that ultimately, what is your value if all you're doing is pushing the button, don't understand the code, and just forwarding the code on? You're not providing any value there.
100%. Is there a point where you would say, yeah, and so the takeaway, this, as hard as it's going to be for you to hear this, the takeaway here is don't ship it. If you hit this point, and if you can't say to yourself, yeah, it does this thing, you flat out should not ship this thing.
It's a hard call, right? Because there's a lot of pressures that you have in your job. I would say that a better, more soft approach here is keep a RAID log. So a RAID log is like an incident log that tracks risks, assumptions. Oh shoot, I can't even remember what the
acronym
RAID actually stands for stuff. But anyways, it's a way to document like this was what was decided. This was the perceived risks of that, and these are the people that kind of signed off on that. And then at least it's documented that we considered this, it was raised, the board decided that it was worth accepting the risk, and you move on. So it's not I don't ship it. Someone is on the hook for accepting the risk of that.
And preferably it's not me. Preferably,
yeah, exactly.
I'm not. Don't come calling me when the thing goes awry, kind of a thing. 1-855-450 NOAA 855-450-6624. The email live at asknoahshow.com. Should we do some feedback?
Let's do it. Our
first email comes in from Connor. Connor writes in and says, "Hi, Noah and Steve. Currently, my company uses a set of aging sonic walls for our firewall. Ugh. It also does the router IPsec tunnels. It is currently serving up traffic for more than 100 site-to-site tunnels for our customers who, unfortunately, mostly get to dictate the tunnel configs. Obviously, they ask for something completely crazy or insecure. We say no. But generally, they steer how the connections are open because they're more restricted, whether because of lack of technical resources, money for better systems, etc. My company is looking to switch away from sonic walls. For obvious reasons, we would like to avoid most enterprise firewall companies like Fortinet, Checkpoint. We're looking into open alternatives. We've thought about options like pfSense, OpenSense, or ViOS. We liked pfSense, OpenSense, but dislike that they are BSD-based, and we have very little experience with BSD. We are moving as many systems to a Linux base as possible. Things like VMware to Proxmox. I even convinced them to let me try Linux on my laptop instead of the mess that is Windows 11. That's why we quickly realized that ViOS uses many standard Linux systems under the hood, like NFTables. It obfuscates them behind their own ViOS CLI. That means that even if you know the Linux command to add a firewall rule, it won't necessarily work because ViOS, you need to know the ViOS command and syntax. We haven't looked much at OpenWRT, but we know it's an option. We'd like to get a system that's easy to document, easy to set up. Maybe even that will track changes in our private Git repo. We'd like to be able to automate certain tasks either with the built-in tools of the platform using something like Ansible. We're totally fine if it's 100% CLI, but we'd like to be able to get to the logs and basic metrics into something like Grafana if there's no GUI. We have the funds and are not opposed to paid solutions. Thanks for any advice and direction." So, Steve, if you walked into a large enterprisey client and they said, "Hey, Steve, we're interested in one of those fancy little open source things," what direction would you send them?
Given that they want to have what's kind of like a GitOps flow where everything is kind of driven from config as code, I would rule out pfSense right off the hop. I would be looking for things that have an API on top of them specifically. I'm not sure if iOS does. OpenSense's API is improving. I should say that I put down my tinkering about 8 months ago, so it could have come a long ways in that. But one of the things that that I was working on, Noah, was a pfSense to OpenSense kind of migration script.
Yep.
And I was leveraging the API for that, and couldn't do absolutely everything with the API, but I could do a good chunk of it, and some of it was a lot of Steve not knowing what he was doing and poking the wrong section. So I'm sure that some of this is I just didn't know what I was doing properly. But pfSense doesn't have an API. There is a third-party add-on that tries to do something with this. I have done work for the pfSensible project, which is an Ansible module to work with pfSense.
Mm-hmm.
It's functional. I would be a little scared to put it into production because of the way essentially you're logging into the pfSense, changing some files on disk, and then kicking pfSense every once in a while. So I definitely would stay away from that. What would you do?
So I'll start by playing devil's advocate, and then I'm going to defeat my own argument as to why I wouldn't actually do what I'm going to suggest. But if you started with pfSense, so I think the first thing I would do is I would offer a change in perspective. And the change in perspective is there's two ways you can approach this. The way that you're talking about doing it, where you want everything to be, kind of Linux native, that is absolutely a viable approach. There's absolutely people that do it that way. But I don't know that I've seen any enterprise ever run just pure Linux and then use the networking functionality of Linux to do firewall stuff. It's not because it can't. It's not because it's not there. It absolutely is. And there's an engineer from Google who's a good friend of mine, and that is the router that runs in his house. And he will tell you, if he were sitting here right now, he would tell you that the reason that he runs it that way is because from his perspective, it's simpler. All the same things that he uses on Linux to manage networking stuff. And he had to set it up one time and then he never touches it. And so it's not, don't read into that the capability isn't there. But for the most part, you don't want to be doing that. You want somebody else to be solving those problems. And that's why those companies obfuscate those things. So playing devil's advocate for pfSense for just a second. I don't know what your site to sites are, and we only have very limited site to site with our clients for very special use cases, typically monitoring. But what we do a decent chunk of is setting site to sites up for medical practices. So this is almost the de facto standard in the medical world. You get an X-ray or an ultrasound or a mammogram or a nuclear image of some kind in hospital A. And you have a radiologist that is going to read it in clinic B, or your primary provider in clinic C, and they need to get access to those images. So a couple things have to happen. One is it's not feasible to sneaker net things around, right? You can't just say like, here, I'm going to export these images and I'm going to put it on a flash drive. Now, don't lose it. Make sure to take it straight to your doctor and make sure that their IT guys plug it in. And then it would get to the front desk reception. She's going to have no idea what to do with this flash drive or what to do with the files. It would be a gigantic mess is what it would be. You can't do it that way. So the way that this is done is every hospital has a protocol for establishing a site-to-site VPN. So if we're the IT provider for, let's say, Clinic C, we will reach out to Hospital A and Hospital B and say, hey, we need to set up a site-to-site VPN. And they'll typically have some sort of a form, I'm guessing very much like you do, where they'll say, like, what kind of tunnel? And, okay, we're going to use IPsec, and we're going to do this for layer 1, this for layer 2, and or stage 1 or stage, I forget the terminology, but we're going to set all this stuff up, and we're going to do it like this, and here's the key, and here's the IP address, and here's the public thing, and here's the resource on our side that we need access to, here's the resource on your side that we need access to, and then typically those images go over something called DICOM. Now, DICOM was never designed to be encrypted, so it needs to go over a tunnel in order to be secure. And we do that all the time with pfSense. Now, the reason I bring that up, because like you, we almost never we don't get to call major hospitals and say, yo, have you heard about the benefits of, OpenVPN? It's a wonderful open, they don't care, right? They have a way to do it. There's a form and you check the box and then they tell you what you're going to use for IQ1 and IQ2. And then you set the thing up and then you go. And there is no, like, would you consider it? And it doesn't work like that. So I can tell you pfSense will fit well into the world that you're playing in. But here's why I personally wouldn't do that. So the biggest reason is what Steve already pointed out. There's no API. So I don't even think it necessarily checks your box as far as being able to track changes. The other thing is I would tell you that there are just some things that the direction of pfSense is going that I struggle to really enthusiastically brace. And I think the last thing that really just kind of rubbed me the wrong way, I went to download the ISO and I had to enter a credit card number. Again, like you, I'm not opposed to paying for good projects and good work. But there just seems to be an increasing amount of barriers that are up. WireGuard was there, then they pulled it back off, then it came back. There's just enough stuff that I would tell you it's worth looking at an alternative. You mentioned OpenSense, and you mentioned that it's based on BSD. If you are willing to accept my previous advice of foregoing this idea that you're going to interact with it like you would on the Linux command line, and if you accept the idea that every routing system is going to do some obfuscation and that's okay, I think you're going to find a very soft landing spot on OpenSense. Updates are extremely predictable. They land you could set your watch based on how consistent updates are going to land in OpenSense. Development is very open. It's very active. It's rare day that a feature comes out that doesn't almost immediately land in OpenSense. This is a bit of a personal preference thing, but I personally like the horizontal layout of their web UI over the vertical one in pfSense. Again, may I have that backwards, but it's a personal preference thing. You can do all of the changes. In fact, it will actually do the version tracking of the changes of the config file for you, and then you can just log into revision history and it'll just tell you, here are the things that you changed. You can jump back. So it'll check that box. And the thing that we really like about it is that you can set it up on as many different devices as you like. So you can install it on a thing at home, play with it, or on the lab, play with it, test it, get the thing working the way you want it, and then you can drop it into production and it'll work just fine. My guess is that you'll be able to just drop it into your Sonic Walls place, and as long as you still have all of the configuration and all of the keys and such for your tunnels, they're all just going to come up, and the other side isn't going to be any the wiser. So I would probably push you strongest in that direction. You mentioned OpenWRT. I'll answer like this. I don't have a single bad thing to say about OpenWRT. So you'll struggle to get me to say anything I don't like about it, but I don't know that I would suggest it in an enterprise environment. I think that if you're it's not that it's not capable, because it's all there. And so if you're willing to find your way around those things, it's fine. But you should know going into it that it's really a system designed more for getting a consistent firewall appliance onto every device and less to be a full-featured firewall system. Our second email comes in from Aaron. Aaron says, listening to the latest episode, you had a caller who asked about the VoIP solution, and you mentioned JMP Chat. You also mentioned the desktop apps of Gajim and Pigeon. I was wondering if you are aware of app.cheogram.com. I have a Cheogram chat and found the single web page that worked well. I use Web App Manager, and then he links to the GitHub to make it feel just like a desktop app and running after closing and reopening. I just wanted to share. So, Aaron, your feedback is actually what prompted Singpolyma to join us at the beginning of the show. We just didn't want to have to make him wait through the first half of the show to get to it. So thank you for drawing my attention to it. I wasn't aware of it. I think that's awesome. Our third email comes from David. He writes in and says, question for Noah and Steve. This question assumes that you both use Linux PC for either work, home, or both. Carry the one.
Pass.
Okay, all right, awesome, great. What do you do if the system update messes up your system and you can't log in, but you can still get to Grub? I'd love to hear your step-by-step response to this situation. Cheers. A system update means something like sudo apt upgrade or update, reboot, sudo zip or dupe, and reboot the equivalent for whatever distro. I'm a tech noob. I'm using OpenSUSE Tumbleweed for the last 4 years. I know about 6 CLI commands. Thanks. I love your show. Very helpful for me. So, Steve, you wake up tomorrow and your computer's hosed and you get to the Grub boot screen. What would you do?
So we sat down before the show and honestly couldn't remember between the two of us the last time that we had run into something like this. I'm sure that it happens, but I can't remember the last time that I broke something in this fashion. I've had drivers break my desktop, but that's then kicking me into the command line and I can do stuff from there. I've also had things where my network drivers went crazy for some reason. But again, that is something that you can kind of get around by like plugging in a USB dongle or other related things. Ultimately, I haven't had to solve this problem in a long time. For desktops and laptops, I run ZFS on root, and I have snapshots that are taken frequently and then go to my backup server and then its backup server. So even though I've not had to repair from a NAS before, you can use, like, because ZFS on root is a thing, there's something called ZFS boot menu, and it allows you to pick booting from a previous snapshot. So even if you did ever mess something up, you could roll back. So that's ultimately what I've done for things like my work laptop, which is running Linux. But I can't send the snapshots off because then I would be having company data not on my work hardware.
Yeah.
I've fallen back. Like I still take the B3FS snapshots every 15 minutes, and we have a backup utility for work that I run every 3 days, and that's about the best that I can do there.
So you may or may not like this answer, but I have taken it as a point of professional pride to avoid fixing my laptop. And let me explain. It's not a function of you can't fix it. In fact, one of the things that drew me into Linux very early on in the early 2000s was the very fact that I never found myself against a brick wall of a problem that you can't fix. If you keep banging at it, eventually there's a way to fix just about anything. But I remember the first time I discovered Chroot. I thought it was amazing. You can take a working system and get into a non-working system and make it into a working system. It's wonderful. But there is a modern practice of Steve, you gave me a word for this, and now it escapes me.
Idempotent.
Idempotent. And the idea is you'll go through and make the necessary changes to a thing. If changes don't need to be made, it'll skip over it. If changes do need to be made, it is made. And so I have tried to embrace that. And true story, spilt coffee on my laptop. This is a few months ago. And while I was on the air doing a radio show, shut my laptop, set it aside, pulled out a backup laptop, plugged a flash drive in, reinstalled the clicked through the 7 screens that I needed to install the operating system, let it run for a little bit, plugged a flash drive in with an Ansible playbook, started that. And by the time I came back, all my data was on there. All my programs were installed. The vast majority of the configuration was made with the exception of signing into a couple of things. And I just picked up and carried on the rest of my day. Not one time did it ever cross my mind, oh, I won't have these files that I need. Not one time did it ever cross my mind, oh, I have this project due and I won't be able. It just didn't happen because I knew everything I was going to need was going to be there, was going to be ready, was going to be good to go. So I share all of that with you to share that 20 years ago or 15 years ago or even 10 years ago, there was probably some real value in recovering. These days, I would tell you that if you're using the machine right, you're treating it as a cattle, not a pet, and you don't care if it crashes. You have good data strategy, so you have your data backed up if you care about it in 3 different places. You have reproducibility, and so you're able to recreate whatever environment you have, and you're willing to pull the system, or you're willing to take any piece of x86 hardware and put it back into practice and make that machine your machine.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of April 19th, 2026, here's the Linux and open source news. Nginx 1.30 has been released. OpenSSL 4.0 is now available. The GNOME team has announced the release of GNOME 50.1. The KDE team has announced the release of KDE Gear 26.04. Mir 2.26 is now out. And Linux 7.1 will have an optional new NTFS driver. In distro news, Zorin OS 18.1 has been released. Solus 4.9 is now available. And Catchy OS becomes the first distro to ship the 7.0 kernel. In open source AI news, Mozilla announces Thunderbolt as an open source enterprise AI client. And Cal is moving its flagship open source program to a proprietary model because it can't cope with the dangers of AI hacking its open code.
Joining us live in the Mumble Room, it is Sleuth, a person who has hands-on experience with ViOS, the very routing platform that was asked for in the feedback segment. Sleuth, welcome into the program.
Hey, Noah and Steve. How's it going this evening?
I appreciate you making the time. So, Steve and I would be deeply grateful if you could share some of the firsthand experience you've had with ViOS and why it may be an appropriate or inappropriate use for our listener who is looking to replace a SonicWall.
All right. So one of the things that I don't have a whole lot of experience with is the tunneling side of things. I've set up WireGuard on it, but that's about it. So I can't super speak to the tunneling part, but I can speak to the other parts of how it functions. ViOS uses a JSON-esque config language, and all of the machine configurations for firewalls and tunnels and network addresses and all that kind of stuff, that's all done in that one config file. So if you are deploying these systems in a way that they're mostly repeatable with small changes, ViOS is absolutely the system for you. In fact, if you want to change hardware, it's as easy as changing the hardware IDs in the network cards section and then just rebooting the machine and it'll pick it all up. So it does a really good job of letting you do that kind of stuff. It's kind of one of those, you work really hard and so you cry once, do all the hard work, and then you get to reap the benefits for a long time. I haven't done the whole Git sync thing yet, but instead of using something like Ansible, I'd highly recommend just having the system take backups. When I was doing most of this work, the only plugin that they had was Google Drive, which I wouldn't recommend because it didn't support encryption. But there may be others now, and it supports Podman containers. So even if it doesn't have what you want, you can very easily add that functionality in.
You also brought up an interesting thought that I hadn't considered by way of, okay, maybe the computer is hosed and maybe you do need to start over, or it's faster to start over, but maybe I left another listener without a piece of information by way of data recovery.
Gotcha. Yeah. So to the other emailer that was talking about his system only booting to Grub, your data is not lost. In case you didn't know, the data is still there, and the best way to recover it that I've found is to take an installation media and boot to that, and then you can pull the files off to an additional drive if you did want to reinstall. As far as actually fixing Grub goes, you can. Sometimes the error message, you can search it and you'll get an answer for it. Sometimes it's easy, but a lot of times when you get down to Grub, it's just not worth your time. You'd be better off reinstalling, just like Noah said.
Sleuth, I appreciate the time. Thanks for joining us. Thanks for calling some of this stuff out and catching some of the slack that I dropped.
Thanks for the show. You do a good job every week. I just thought I'd add my 2 cents.
NASA has returned to the moon, and I am one of the skeptical people that was like, why are we doing this? Why? But some of the innovation that is coming out of this, I think, is absolutely amazing. And so Steve and I wanted to kind of shine a spotlight on it to talk about a couple of these things. So some of the terminology that I think is relevant to just kind of clear the deck. The crew exists inside of the crew module, and that's where they live. It's where their beds, it's where their food, it's all of those sorts of things. Obviously, space is, newsflash, not really a hospitable environment, and so it gets really, really cold, and it gets really, really hot, and there's no air, and there's all manner of other things that would just kill humans. So to support that, they're attached atop of a module called a European service module, and basically you can think of it almost like a big container that has canisters of oxygen, tanks of water, CO2 scrubbers, like all of the things that are necessary to support life. And the crew module sits on top the ESM, and that the ESM then provides basically via this big umbilical cord everything that the crew needs to live. Now, fun fact, radio waves have typically been what's been used to communicate to and from the spaceship, to and from when we send rovers to Mars and that sort of thing. The problem is radio waves can be slow. And so, for example, it takes 11 minutes, and this is best case scenario because depending on orbits and all the things, 11 minutes to get a signal from Earth to Mars. And then you got to return the signal, so it takes another 11 minutes to get from Mars back to Earth. So if you send a command to a robot on Mars, it's 22 minutes before you find out what that command has done. And there are some really funny stories by way of they were doing a mission, they're like, go forward 10 feet. Well, 22 minutes later, they find out that one of the wheels was stuck, and so it didn't go forward 10 feet. Instead, it just dug itself halfway through a hole. And then you got to send a command to stop, which is going to take 11. You get the idea. So on the Orion Artemis 2, they deployed a new system. It's called the Orion Optical Communication System, or commonly abbreviated O2O. And it allows the astronauts aboard the Orion to send 4K footage from their mission down to Earth at speeds of 260 megabits per second.
The crew on board Integrity is testing a new, quicker way of sending data. Attached to the outside of the European service module is an innovative laser communication system called O2O. O2O uses an infrared laser beam to send and receive video and other data. On Earth, ground stations in California, New Mexico, and Australia send and receive signals with O2O. Inside each ground station is an incredibly sensitive detector.
So here's what I think is so interesting. The first thing that I think is interesting is the power consumption. This thing operates on 1 watt. 1 watt of power. The second thing that I think is of note, it's using an incredibly focused beam in order to send the signal to the receiver, which is capable of functioning on just a single photon of light. So it's an insanely sensitive receiver. Now, as you can imagine, the way that it was explained to me was it's the equivalent of trying to hit an ant with a laser pointer from across a football field. So the way this works, the ground station sends up a very wide beam of light. And as the spacecraft passes over this wide beam of light, the terminal, the O2O terminal mounted atop the European service module, picks up this wide beam of light. And that then gives the laser a general direction in which to search for the ground station. So it sends a laser and looks for this incredibly sensitive ground station. As soon as it hits even one photon of light, hits the ground station terminal then communicates back and it establishes this bidirectional link. Once that bidirectional link is established, they get 260 megabits per second. So it's like wireless fiber. And they were able to send 4K high definition video from the freaking moon 240,000 miles away. Steve, you want to install one of these in your house? I bet it fixes your Wi-Fi problem. Well, we'll talk. But I think that we could, I mean, you put a really tall tower in your tree or your house or whatever, and I'll put one in my house, and we could have like, if they can do it from the moon and back, I mean, I think you and I can probably get from my house, I mean, North Dakota to South Dakota, that should be a walk in the park.
Well, are you smart enough to figure out the curve of the Earth from here to there like a sniper would? Because I'm not.
I think you'd have to build a tower tall enough to overcome that curve. I think the only reason it works in space is because it's line of sight.
You have no idea how that would work. That's well beyond my understanding.
So stuff like this comes out of it, and I actually read a pretty trashy write-up of the Artemis 2 mission in which they're like, this is the biggest failure in NASA history because they didn't get people excited about going to space. I'm like, you're kidding me, really? Because I came into this as one of the skeptics, and I'm very excited at some of the stuff that's coming out of it. I mean, the fact that they're able to do this stuff, and the other thing that I just think is really cool, if there's so much documentation that is going into how they're solving these problems, that you can learn from the way that NASA does these things and apply them to your own life. And one of my favorite quotes, in fact, one of these days I'm going to clip it and put it on a soundboard, is complicated solutions are really just things that haven't had enough time to distill down into something simple and elegant, because a truly good solution to a problem is by nature simple and elegant. And in anything more complex is just, it hasn't had enough time to distill down. And I love that. I love that way of looking at things because I think it's just a cleaner way. But anyway, so O2O, if you're interested in a way to communicate long distance, so next time you go 250,000 or more miles, Steve, make sure to strap one of these to your humdinger and just point it towards your ground station. You'll be back in business. I'm thinking this might be the answer to your Wi-Fi problems. That's what I think.
Right, except that the Wi-Fi problem is going to have to. Wouldn't I have to point this at every single device? And then have those devices never move or anybody walk in front of them?
I really think you're getting bogged down in the details here. I think that I think you shouldn't cloud the issue with logic. And I think that you should just be happy of the fact that NASA invented the problem to your solution. 260 megabits, my friend. You can stream 4K video across your house. They can do it from space. And I'm sure we can find like a cheaper, I'm sure Alibaba has like a knockoff of the O2O.
That the dogs or the kids aren't going to get in front of?
Right, exactly. Yeah, there's no problems here at all. I think this is very workable. Check it out. There's a write-up available for you at podcast.asknoahshow.com. Hey, while you're there, you can check out the rest of the show notes. You know what else is there? Yeah, everything we went through in the show and then some, because there's a whole bunch of stuff we just don't have time to get to. You know what else is there? Every episode since episode uno. So you want to go back to the catalog and hear how terrible the show was when it first started and how awesome it's gotten since Steve and I have refined it? You can do that. Podcast.asknoahshow.com. We're back next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central, asknoahshow.com. Have a good week.